Say, that's pretty, isn't it? And believe me, that Tucker is a modern miracle of mechanics. And the man who built it, well, let me tell you something about Preston Thomas Tucker. The first time he ever saw an automobile was back in 1912. In the excitement of the situation, he found himself on a muddy road with the wheels of that automobile passing over his legs. But the mud was soft and he wasn't hurt, and that was the first view of the machine that was to mold his thoughts and actions for most of the years of his life. It started a series of plans and actions that brought the Tucker car that everyone is talking about. And why shouldn't they talk? This new Tucker has everything. Has individual wheel suspension. It has a rear motor. And it also oh, but now wait a minute now. I'm getting ahead of my story. I'll tell you more about the car later, but first, let me tell you a little more about the man Tucker. Preston Tucker is a man who believes first, last, and always in the American way of free enterprise. Though there are those who believe there is no more room in this country for new industries, or perhaps new competition is more correct, Mr. Tucker doesn't feel that way. Even when just a kid, Preston was giving competition, but fair competition, to automobile dealers in his hometown of Capac, Michigan. He bought up cars that seemed hopelessly wrecked. Those that were basically sound, he rebuilt and changed in his mother's backyard and resold them on the open market. His shop was the barn and back of his mother's home. And today, though his shop is not a barn but the world's largest automotive plant, this same Preston Tucker is changing the design and mechanics of the modern motor car to bring you the new Tucker. But to get back to Mr. Tucker, just to point up an incident in his early life that led to the building of this revolutionary car, back in 1921, young Tucker was continuing to show his interest in things mechanical. This time it was the flying machine. At Monroe, Michigan, a parachutist with his troop refused to make a jump, and Tucker took his place. The jump went smoothly, but the landing didn't. He came down on top of a moving freight car. The chute pulled him down an embankment. Well, while he was in the hospital, he worked on an engineering course by mail. This was the first of many mail and night school courses that were to come. He lacked college or university training, but his self-teaching, drive, and ambition were to make him the recipient of an award presented by the New York Museum of Science and Industry, naming him the Automotive Man of the Year 1947 for his outstanding achievements in designing and developing an advanced type of automobile with new and improved features of safety and performance. To Mr. Tucker, it probably seemed like a long trail from that beautiful car back down to that barn in his mother's backyard. It was here that he worked for years on the dream that was to become his automobile in reality. From this workshop came the ideas for the Tucker engine and transmission, and too came the ideas for some of the wartime inventions of Preston Tucker. In 1936, Mr. Tucker saw the war clouds looming on the horizon, and he put aside his plans for building his car to work on ideas for war equipment should war come to his country. After months of intensive engineering and designing work, he built the Tucker combat car and later the famous Tucker gun turret. The combat car had everything, including his power-operated gun turret, complete bulletproofing and air conditioning for the operator. However, it had one drawback. It was too fast. 100 miles an hour, the fastest combat car ever built. At that time, it was the opinion that a combat car shouldn't be driven over 35 miles an hour, so the government wasn't interested in contracting for any at that time. And besides, the prospect of war, to many, seemed remote. But it would have been a nice thing to have in 1941 and 45. This gun turret, however, was one of Tucker's wartime inventions that was used to very good advantage during the war. It was power-operated, and at the touch of a button revolved a full 360 degrees around and around and up or down. United States bombers, PT boats, and other war vehicles were equipped with this gun turret. It was another of Preston Tucker's inventions, but he turned the patents over to the United States government during the war. After the war was over, Tucker went back to his life ambition to build his better automobile for the American public. Then came that wonderful day in June 1947 when the new Tucker car was christened at ceremonies in the newly acquired Tucker plant in Chicago, and with over 2,000 dealers looking on and applauding the car and the builder. This newly christened car was complete with its safety chamber, its interchangeable front and back seats, wide enough for 4 persons, and only 5 feet from road to roof, the first to set the pace for newer, lower-built automobiles. The dealers saw that the new Tucker had the safety sponge rubber crash panel. They saw the beautifully different instrument panel. They saw how easy it was to install the radio, and too, they saw the air conditioning underseat heater. Preston Tucker's long and thorough background in automobile sales enabled him to build up his organization of over 2,000 dealers and distributors all over the world. There are Tucker sales and service agencies in 40 foreign countries from Iceland to the Belgian Congo. Here, Mr. Dulian, the general sales manager, is talking to Prince Ahmed Hamza of Egypt. Dealers and distributors from all over the world have visited the Tucker plant in Chicago to see and to ride in the car they're going to sell in their home countries. Mr. Davies, the export manager, is discussing the car with a representative of the Swiss government and with Senor Fernandez of Spain. For these foreign distributors, interest and amazement at the vastness of the Tucker plant was indeed great. The Tucker plant is the largest automotive plant in the world. It occupies over 6 million square feet of floor space, capable of producing 120 Tuckers per hour. It contains everything needed to build a car from the motor to the upholstery. Getting this plant was one of the major battles of Preston Tucker. He spent months obtaining the lease and finally moved in. Then, when things seemed ready to move, newspapers carried the headline, "Tucker loses Chicago plant." In the Conestoga plane, he flew the car to Washington and again took up the fight to get the plant. This is the same plane in which he transported the car to showings all over the United States. In Washington, just as in every other city where Tucker cars appeared on the street, people crowded around to see, and they liked what they saw. As Mr. Tucker drove away from his hotel in Washington, he carried with him a new lease on the mammoth Chicago plant. A never-say-die spirit has won other battles for Preston Tucker. Even before obtaining the plant, he had to get money to start the business. He decided the fairest way, the American free enterprise way, was a stock issue whereby the small wage earner could become part of the corporation. So in July 1947, he put the issues up to the public, going on the radio in person many times to tell the Tucker story. Though many obstacles were obviously put in his path, he did put through the issue, and the long road toward mass production of the Tucker car was begun. Well, here's more proof you can't get away from a Tucker. But to mass-produce the car was a long, rocky road. First, definite decisions had to be made on styling of the car to be built in large volume. Drawings and blueprints by the thousands had to be made. After many months, the style was decided upon. Then came long months of final engineering, though basically the production car was to retain the styling and engineering of the original handmade car. Constant improvements were to be made. Inevitable changes followed, with the ever-present thought of building even a better automobile. The Tucker plant in Chicago has the equipment and machines to build this revolutionary rear-engine automobile. The Tucker Corporation owns or leases from the War Assets Administration literally thousands of machines, from tiny precision lathes to gigantic punch presses the size of this room. The Tucker plant, besides its 3 giant production lines, also contains paint, trim, and upholstery lines. Everything needed to produce this automobile with the engine in the rear. That's where the source of power really belongs, you know. That's the efficient, economical place for driving power. And with hundreds less parts than are used in the conventional car, there's no wastage of power in the Tucker. And you remember the Tucker combat car we saw earlier? Well, that wasn't a lost cause, for many of the tried and proven innovations of that sturdy military vehicle have gone into the Tucker car. For instance, that individual wheel suspension. Once you've ridden in a Tucker through gravel, mud, and on bumpy roads, you'll see the advantage of individual wheel suspension. For inside the car, you just don't feel the bumps. The highly secret Tucker transmission was an outgrowth of an idea used in the combat car. This may give you some idea of the heat treating process, which makes the parts of the transmission extremely durable, tough, and long-lasting. And here are some of the Tucker transmissions in the making. It is this mechanism that enables the Tucker to accelerate to 85 miles an hour from a standing start in 15 seconds. Try that on your car. So you see, the beauty of this car is more than skin deep. It's safe, it's beautiful, it's fast, and it's comfortable. And it's really got brakes. Brakes so highly improved you can hardly believe it. Actually, it took years to get all the improvements to be found in this car. Here are some scenes showing a fleet of Tuckers being test-driven on the Indianapolis Speedway. Since the Tucker was actually developed on the Speedway, it seemed logical to make the test there. What's that? Oh, you wonder why I say it was developed on the Speedway? Well, here is the reason. Back in 1925, Preston Tucker teamed up with the late Harry Miller, and between them, they produced 11 of the 16 winners at Indianapolis. In their years together, they designed, engineered, and built many of the great racing cars of the era. Death was to cheat Harry Miller of the opportunity of continuing automobile engineering research. Tucker carries on alone. This Tucker rear-engine special was just one of the many built by the Tucker-Miller combination. Year after year, as they worked on racers such as these, they were planning to build an American passenger car that would have all the stamina and engineering qualities of their winning racers. And this was the result. These tests at the Speedway, plus road tests from coast to coast, proved that the Tucker car, though as big as the biggest, is nearly as economical to drive as the smallest car. It is a big car, 130-inch wheelbase, 166 horsepower rear engine, wide seats, front and back cushions interchangeable, and capable of riding 4 persons comfortably. The car is capable of 130 miles per hour. However, it hasn't been opened up completely yet. At moderate speeds, it gives well over 20 miles to a gallon of gas. But speed is not the main thought in building the car. The Tucker symbol is a symbol of safety. And great plans were made in the engineering department to make it the safest car on the road. Take a look at this Tucker. It was doing over 95 miles an hour when it was turned over 3 times. Yet they jacked it up, put on a new tire, and drove it away. Do you know of any other car that was driven away under its own power after turning over 3 times at 95 miles an hour? Oh, by the way, the driver got only a scratch on his arm. As you notice, the Tucker safety windshield popped out. No lacerated faces from going through a Tucker windshield. No bruises or broken bones from hitting a hard dash. The sponge rubber panel and crash compartment of the Tucker are obvious safety features. If an accident happens, you're safer in a Tucker. This plane has flown thousands of miles, carrying corporation executives on various business trips to make the production of the Tucker car possible. Now, just imagine you starting a pleasant weekend in a Tucker. Put the suitcases in the front, and away you go. And while you're riding, let me tell you why you're getting the safety, dependability, and styling that is so far ahead of all other motor cars. Mr. Tucker, who is directly responsible for the car, has devoted his life to the planning and building of this car. His first real automobile experience came when he was 13 years old. He was hired by the vice president of the Cadillac Motor Car Company to fill the important post of office boy. Tucker immediately made plans to expedite his duties of delivering messages, reports, schedules, and other jobs. He asked his boss, D. McCall White, who is now an advisor to the president of the Tucker Corporation, for some skates so he could get his jobs done faster. He got the skates and also an instructive course on engine and chassis design. 5 years later, he joined the Ford Motor Company to continue his learn-by-doing method. After years with Ford, who, by the way, also found that breaking into the automobile business was anything but easy, Tucker went into the sales field. But before doing so, however, he rounded out his engineering background by working in every department of automobile production, including the foundry, production lines, and in all the shops. Once in the sales field, he worked as wholesale and retail sales manager for Studebaker, and later for Chrysler. Still later, he was zone manager for Pierce Arrow, later was a Packard distributor. When you drive your Tucker into a filling station, it won't take nearly as much gas as you're used to buying. Just fill the tank and you're off again to continue your trip in a really smooth-riding, powerful, fast, and safe automobile. If Preston Tucker and the corporation had not had to fight for their very existence, you, the great American public, would now be the proud owners of the first completely new car in 50 years.